In the world of AI, there's this absolutely massive, high-stakes game for dominance playing out right now. But who's actually winning? Well, in this explainer, we're going to map out the entire power structure of the industry, layer by layer, to find out who's really holding all the cards.
So yeah, who really rules the world of AI? I'll tell you right now, it's not just one company. It's not a single piece of tech. It is a massive power struggle, a battle being fought on all these different fronts. I'm talking from the power plants that are feeding the beast, all the way up to the governments trying to shape its future. This is a story of kings and their challengers, of these huge, seemingly impenetrable fortresses and the secret weapons designed to tear them all down. All right, let's dive in.
So to really understand this battle, we need a map. And this is going to be our map. The 7-layer AI stack. Let's call it our Tower of Power. We're basically going to climb this tower, starting at the very physical foundations of energy and compute, all the way up to the abstract levers of power like capital and sovereignty. And you know what? At each level, we're going to crown a king.
Okay, so how do we even analyze this fight for the throne? Well, we've got one really powerful idea we're going to use, the Innovator's Dilemma. Think of this as the secret weapon for every single challenger out there. It's this trap where a king's greatest strength, which is just rationally serving their biggest and best customers, becomes the very thing that blinds them to these scrappy little upstarts who eventually come along and take their crown. This pattern, this is the key to everything we are about to see.
Let's start at the bottom of the tower, the absolute physical foundation that everything else is built on top of. You've got energy to power the systems, and you've got compute to turn all that power into actual processing. So who are the kings down here? Well, for energy, it's a company called NextEra Energy. And for compute, in a total landslide, it's NVIDIA. These two companies basically form the bedrock of the entire AI revolution.
So, why NextEra? It's not just that there's some massive utility. No, they are surgically focused on AI. Case in point, they literally signed a deal to restart a decommissioned nuclear plant just to power Google's AI data centers. Think about that. They are directly connecting the atom to the algorithm, making themselves the essential power source for AI's absolutely insatiable thirst for energy.
But here's their dilemma. NextEra is built for these huge, stable 20-year contracts with giants like Google. They can't be bothered with messy, small-scale deals from some tech startup. And this, right here, creates the perfect opening for a really unlikely challenger, Bitcoin miners. They're pivoting to AI, setting up shop in these remote, kind of ugly locations with cheap power that big utilities just ignore. They can move super fast, they can offer these flexible GPU plus megawatt bundles, and they cater to what the incumbent see as toy projects, right up until those toys become serious threats. Now for compute, 90%. Just let that sink in. That's NVIDIA's approximate share of the market for high-end AI chips. They don't just rule this layer, they are this layer. It is a near total monopoly on the hardware that powers today's most advanced AI. This is a true choke point in the entire industry.
So what's NVIDIA's strategy as the reigning king? It's pretty simple, actually. If you're them, you're thinking, protect our software advantage, CUDA, at all costs. Whatever you do, don't commoditize the product. And make sure you prioritize selling only the most powerful, highest margin chips to our biggest customers. It's a perfectly rational business strategy. And it's also the classic innovator's dilemma trap.
And who are NVIDIA's richest customers? The cloud giants. And the one thing they hate more than anything is being dependent on a single supplier. So what are they doing? They're building their own chips. Amazon, Google, Microsoft. Look, none of them need a chip that's better than NVIDIA's best. They just need one that's good enough for their own internal use, is cheaper to operate, and, most importantly, breaks them free from NVIDIA's control. It is literally an attack from within the castle walls.
Okay, let's keep moving up the tower to the core. You can think of this as the brains and the body of AI. So the intelligence layer, that's the models themselves. Think GPT-4. And the infrastructure, well, that's the cloud where they all live. And who are our kings here? Well, at the intelligence layer, it is definitely Microsoft. And for infrastructure, the long-reigning champion is still Amazon with AWS. These two basically control the software and the servers that define the entire AI experience for most of the world.
Microsoft's path to the throne was this brilliant, three-pronged attack. First, they locked in an exclusive partnership with OpenAI, which gave them the best model, GPT-4. Second, they control the distribution channel by baking AI into everything. Windows, Office, through Copilot, and third, they're deeply, deeply embedded with the government with authorization to run AI on top secret-level clouds. That is an incredibly powerful combination.
So how in the world do you attack a fortress like that? Well, you start by asking this one simple question. And believe me, it's the question every single CIO is asking right now. Why should I pay Microsoft $30 per user per month for Copilot when all these open source models, like Meta's Llama, are getting so good that we can just host our own good enough AI for a fraction of the price? You see, this is classic disruption from below.
Now let's look at that infrastructure layer. I mean, the numbers really confirm Amazon's crown. AWS is still the clear leader in the cloud. It's the digital real estate where most of the internet lives. They had a decade-long head start, and that kind of scale is just really hard to compete with. But you should definitely notice Microsoft's Azure closing that gap.
But here it is again. Amazon's greatest strength is also its biggest weakness. AWS is a one-size-fits-all, high-margin machine. They're just not built to create strange, low-margin, super specialized infrastructure just for AI. It would totally break their beautifully standardized model. And this opens the door for new players who do only that. Build these hyper-optimized data centers in weird places with cheap power, all designed from the ground up just for AI workloads.
All right, we are now ascending to the very top of the tower, to the most abstract, but also the most powerful layers. Capital, which is control of the money, data, control of information, and sovereignty, which is leverage over nations themselves.
And who are the kings of control? Well, for capital, it's Alphabet, Google. For data, especially in the government world, it's Palantir. And for sovereignty, look who's back on the throne again, Microsoft. Okay, let's start with Google, the king of capital. Their search ad business is, arguably the most successful money-making machine in history. But that success has become a trap. See, every time Google's AI just gives you a direct answer to your question, that's one less click on a high-value ad. So they are totally caught between innovating with AI and protecting their cash cow. And that hesitation, that is the attacker's single greatest opportunity.
Now for the data layer. There is one number here that is just staggering: $10 billion. That's the value of Palantir's deal to become the core data and AI operating system for the entire U.S. Army. They are, effectively, the nervous system for critical state functions, handling everything from military targeting to intelligence. That is a deeply entrenched position of power.
But, and you probably saw this coming, Palantir's strength is also its weakness. Their model is super high touch, it's highly complex, and it is incredibly expensive. That's perfect if you're the Pentagon, right? But it leaves them really vulnerable in the wider market. Why? Because competitors like Snowflake and Microsoft are building cheaper, good enough platforms that are way easier to use. Look, if your company isn't trying to land a rocket on Mars, Palantir is probably just overkill.
And now, the very top of the tower, sovereignty. Microsoft is king here. And the reason is actually pretty simple. Just think about this. If you turned off Microsoft services for 1 week, Western civilization would basically grind to a halt. From the Windows OS on every government computer, to the Office suite used to write policy, to the Azure cloud running classified operations, Microsoft is the foundational digital infrastructure of the modern state. So, as we look back down from the top of our tower, what's the single biggest takeaway from all of this? It is this unchanging pattern. At every single layer, from the bottom to the top, from energy to sovereignty, the story is exactly the same. The kings are trapped by their own success. The challengers attack from the margins with things the kings dismiss as toys. And then, eventually, those margins become the new center, and the king's fortress becomes their prison. This framework, this tower of power, it gives us a map to understand the biggest power struggle of the 21st century. The players are on the board, the rules of the game are clear. So the only question left for you is this: which king will be the first to fall?